This is My Queer Muslim Life. This is a podcast for queer Muslim stories across Sydney, Australia. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal land, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, as well as to emerging leaders. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Hi, welcome to Sydney Queer Muslims' first ever podcast session. My name is Nafia. I'm the social worker for this organisation, and the topic of discussion today is homelessness, as it's something experienced by many young queer and non-queer individuals. It's definitely a situation that involves challenges, trauma, and courage to find a safe place you can call home. Here with us today are two lovely guests, Jamal and Anna, who will be sharing their lived experiences of being homeless in the past. Thank you for joining us today. I think it's quite brave for you to open up about the journey you've both experienced. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I use they, them pronouns. I'm in my mid-20s.
And I'm Jamal. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in my early 20s.
Okay, great. So to start off, tell us a bit about what led you guys to homelessness and like the feelings that you guys were experiencing during those initial moments.
Well, for me, it can be summed up pretty quickly by a family breakdown. And what led to that was a few factors. One was I was living with my parents who were in a very unhappy marriage, who were, should have separated long before they eventually did. And that led to a lot of hostility, tension, and a lot of emotional abuse and neglect at home. And so home didn't become a place that I wanted to be. It wasn't a place that I felt safe in. On top of that, I come from, a Muslim family with a Pakistani father who was very traditional and, patriarchal. And so being the eldest daughter, there were a lot of expectations put on me. He was very strict about all aspects of my life, including what I wore, what friends I made, who I was allowed to hang out with, when I could go outside, socialize both in person and on the internet. And there were also talks of, who I was going to marry. There were conversations around him wanting to marry me off to someone from Pakistan. And so there was a lot of that going on too, plus the usual stresses of being a teenager that everyone experiences, school stress, peer pressure, fitting in, all of that kind of stuff. And so that all sort of culminated. The strictness from my father grew. Like, he became even more strict as the years went on, to the point where it felt suffocating to be at home. And eventually, like, the emotional abuse was starting to look like it was going to become physical when he started to make physical threats against my life. And so once that started happening, I figured it was time for me to leave. And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, was once he started making the threats. And then, I left.
Wow. Well, first of all, that was a very, very brave thing of you to do. And thank you for sharing that. That must have been such a toxic household. And it would have been frustrating because you would have felt like you were losing your own identity when somebody else would have been pressuring you to do so many different things.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So, like, what stage in your life were you in when you decided to leave home?
Yeah, so I was about the sort of issues in the family had been going on for many years at that point, but I left when I was about just not long after I turned 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been pretty tough. And as I remember, Jamal also left when he was 18.
Yeah, so we have very similar sort of backgrounds. Like, I had a very... I'm trying to think of a good word for it. It was the house was full of turmoil pretty much. It was a very unstable sort of household. Parents not happy. My dad, he had a lot of sort of traumas and stress due to his job, PTSD. It was very hard for him to control himself. He would there was physical abuse involved, the threats, but the thing is, it wasn't just me, it was also my younger brother that was also taking the brunt of it. And around a similar age to you, he just wouldn't stop, he wouldn't change. I didn't see any changes within him, so I took my younger brother and left pretty much. And yeah, that's sort of how I got myself into that sort of situation. But yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys shared a few similar experiences with initially leaving your homes and your families. What were the very first steps that you guys took for crisis accommodation after that?
Well, for me, in sort of the lead up to, thinking about wanting to leave, I was, at the time I was working at my uncle's job, and he gave me $50 a week. And, I had never worked before. I didn't know how much rent was. I thought, oh yeah, I'll be set up if I just keep, it's cash in hand. If I keep saving these $50 notes, then yeah, I can move out. No worries. That's how the world works. But yeah, very quickly realized that that wasn't going to happen. I actually got connected with, I was already seeing a counsellor at the time, and he had connected me with Mission Australia, who had crisis accommodation available. And so they were chatting with me. I'd briefed them sort of on my situation, and then very quickly organised a way for me to escape pretty much. And so once we had kind of decided like when it was going to happen, it was going to happen when both my parents were out of the house.
Yeah.
I very, very quickly packed a suitcase of my things as much as I could carry, which wasn't a lot, and had a caseworker meet me outside of the apartment, who then took me to the place that I was going to stay at. My sister was in the know, so she knew what was going on, and I kind of relied on her to keep my whereabouts a secret from my parents, which was very hard for her because, she was only 16, having to deal with all of that. And also it was quite hard. I was the eldest child, and I had 2 younger siblings, and a cat. So I had to leave behind my siblings and the cat, which was really, really hard.
Really hard.
I felt a lot of survivor's guilt, even though I received the brunt of the neglect and abuse. I knew that it would leave them in a difficult situation, and so I had to tackle those feelings immediately after I left.
Yeah. You must have been kind of weighing in your mind, would it be worth it to stay because of your siblings and a home that you stayed in for so long, or would it be better to just leave? So did you feel like you were set on that decision?
I did. Similar to Jamal, I could not see my parents' like behavior improving, especially like my dad. I also was very sheltered as a child, and so I really didn't know, you know, what the outside world really would how it would operate, and so I kind of just saw like, you know, no kind of way out, and so I had to like throw myself out into the world,
which is pretty common within like Muslim households. Yeah. Wow. So it was just like a fresh new experience for you, and it would have been incredibly challenging at first.
Yeah. I didn't even know how to do my own laundry.
Wow.
I could barely like cook. Like I had no like independent living skills.
Yeah, because like you had just finished, you were in your last year of high school, was it?
I had dropped out of high school at that point.
Right. Yeah, that would definitely be an entirely new experience for someone that just left high school. And what about you, Jamal? How were your initial steps?
So initially, it was a very like sudden sort of decision and a sudden change that happened in the matter of hours. It's just that my dad's threats towards my younger brother were just getting worse and worse, and then one night was just too much, and I decided to reach out and contact 1-800-RESPECT. And I was talking with a social worker and asking for advice on what I can do. And while explaining the situation to her, I didn't fully understand how bad things were until the social worker reacted, worried for my safety, my younger brother's safety. And she actually advised us to leave the house as soon as possible. And so we left that night. I was texting around, looking for a place to stay, friends. We ended up finding a place with one of my younger brother's friends. And I called another friend from high school to, like, hey, come pick me up. It was in the middle of the night, so he pulled through, packed a suitcase full of stuff. And yeah, it didn't feel like reality in the moment. It was just sort of, we snuck out in the middle of the night while they were asleep. So it was crazy walking out of the front door holding suitcases, trying not to make a noise. And ended up at my brother's friend's house. And yeah, the feelings for the first few days is just like nothing I've ever really experienced. Like you feel guilt, but you feel relief at the same time, and you feel like you should be contacting your parents, but you know that you can't, and it's a lot of stresses, and it is a very, very, it's a situation that's very hard to sort of relay through words. And so that's sort of the initial like first few days and how I sort of reached out, and I ended up in a form of accommodation. This wasn't necessarily linked with any services yet. This is all just sort of like just between friends, and you know, I hadn't reached out to the only service I really reached out to is 1-800-RESPECT. And so yeah, that's
right. Wow. So that must have been such an anxiety-inducing moment.
Yeah,
like,
it was terrifying.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
terrifying.
Yeah, that was like when I left the first night, like I experienced my very first like full-blown anxiety attack.
Wow.
Where like it didn't feel like on the outside, like I wasn't hyperventilating, and I wasn't, you know, I didn't look or even feel particularly anxious, but I remember I couldn't sleep the first night because it felt like there was an elephant sitting on my chest. It was like a very like, it like to the point where I felt like it was hard to breathe, and I thought it was, I don't know, I thought I just needed some Panadol or something. And so when I went to one of the caseworkers, I was like, oh, you know, I think I need to see I think I just need some Panadol or something, because this pain in my chest is kind of getting a bit out of hand. And so they took me to the doctor the next morning, and the doctor was like, no, that's just anxiety. And I was like, I didn't know that anxiety could feel so physical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you've both mentioned caseworkers and social workers from your like initial steps of leaving home. did they put together like a crisis plan for you guys? And what kind of resources were available?
So I was assigned a caseworker, the same one who had picked me up from my place to take me to the refuge, and she was really lovely. This is where my memory gets a little bit fuzzy, but I do remember at some point, we had sat down and had a conversation, and she was trying to, get across like sort of what I needed support in different aspects of my life, like in terms of like, okay, like now we've got this short-term solution for you, like how can we support you more longer term? And so there was talks around, I needed to get on Centrelink. I needed to like see a doctor for my health stuff. And then like eventually down the line it was like, what's accommodation going to look like for you long term? So like, towards the end of the stay, like we're going to make sure we meet about, what other options there are for me. And so I had that from the beginning. It was quite holistic. And I really felt like kind of all avenues were like looked after. And so that was really great until my caseworker left.
Oh.
after like a couple weeks.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so I was left without a caseworker for a long time, and then assigned another one eventually who was a lot less empathetic and a lot less proactive about my issues. And so it didn't really feel like I had a caseworker after that, even though I technically did have one.
Wow, so it almost felt like you were kind of managing things on your own after that?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, that sounds like something heavy, especially when you're already struggling with trying to put things together in your life and kind of like finding stable ground on how you can pick yourself up from the situation you were in.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what about you, Jamal?
So, I do feel like the caseworker that you get assigned to makes a massive difference. It's literally a night and day difference. Initially, it was a lot of the memories are like a blur to me. There was so much happening. For the first few days, all I can really remember is just being on the phone, pretty much all 9 to 5, just calling around different services. I've actually lost count of the amount of different people I've talked to, and all the different avenues that I was sort of put together with. But maybe because in my case it was very disjointed, like I wasn't with one specific caseworker. I was sort of bouncing around between like talking to DCJ and Link to Home and then talking to this person from this service. Like I think Uniting Church or something was involved, and a lot of different services were all sort of, I was just being bounced around between. So a lot of it was like sort of fending for myself. Like I remember the social workers from the DCJ Link to Home side of things were mostly, they would call me every few days and just see like, oh, how's the accommodation going? Just a general update on my situation. And I'd need to do that to sort of keep staying in crisis accommodation. But yeah, like because from the very beginning, my whole experience was very unorganized. It was a bit hectic. For the first few days, I was staying at my brother's friend's house, and that's how I sort of got into contact properly with social workers and moved there into crisis accommodation. But yeah, definitely the type of social worker that you're set up with makes a huge difference in terms of personal support and the services that you are made aware of and you can use. And yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. It would make a massive difference, especially with the amount of empathy that they would show It would
Yeah.
feel like, you know, you were actually supported.
Yeah.
So I know that there's like financial aid available for individuals experiencing homelessness or that are in like crisis situations, such as like Centrelink payments. Did you guys apply for any like Centrelink benefits to help your situation at the time?
Yes. So I was put on Centrelink. So my caseworker, who initially helped me get set up on that. So
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was study allowance or job seeker, because I was enrolled in TAFE at some point. But yeah, so that was kind of my income was Centrelink.
Yeah.
For a couple years actually.
Okay.
And you know, at the accommodation that I was at, we had to pay board, which was about maybe $80. But I didn't have to like pay rent. And so I had, I guess, a decent amount of money to sort of play around with.
Survive.
Yeah. We had access in the refuge to financial literacy workshops, which was really helpful for me,
okay.
and for the rest of the people staying there, who taught us about sort of like, you know, rent, like what's, you know, and what bond is, and all those things to help us prepare for when we eventually would have to leave the refuge. So yeah, that was what I was on. But once I had left the refuge and I was kind of like, I started like paying rent later down the track, that became a lot more difficult because the Centrelink payment didn't cover the rent. And mind you, I was actively very, you know, very diligently looking for work. Like over the course of like 2 years, 1.5 years, I had applied for 500 jobs.
Wow.
And hadn't been successful. Had a couple of interviews, but nothing further than that. And so, you know, I got about, you know, maybe between $300-400 a fortnight.
Yeah.
And you know, there wasn't a place that could, like, that rent was low enough for me to be able to live there. And so on top of that, in my area, the government was trialing the Basics card, which I forget what the name was changed to after that, but essentially it was a card that you had to use to access your Centrelink income, which could only be used at selected places. So like Woolies, some petrol stations. And so I was limited even further by, like, you know, how I could spend my money. I
do remember this actually. I think it was so that it would avoid people kind of like misusing that money maybe on like alcohol.
Yeah, they specifically trialled it in places where there was a high percentage of people on welfare.
Right.
And so there was an assumption that people on welfare spend all their money on alcohol and drugs and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, like later down the track, like the evidence from that trial showed that that was not the case, that people were mostly spending money on things that they needed, like food. But even so, they still continued to roll out that card. So just another policy failure.
Yeah. What about you, Jamal? Were there any payments that you applied for?
So, like always with my situation, it's a bit complicated. So, at this point, me and my younger brother, so he's receiving, so he went through Centrelink and started receiving, I think it was job seeker payments. But I didn't receive any Centrelink benefits throughout the whole time. I forgot exactly what it was. I just remember the entire phone call with Centrelink was just a blur. Different policies, different rules, different exceptions. But I didn't end up going through Centrelink, and that was really difficult for the first, I'd say, month of it, as I had no savings, and I wasn't really in a position to be able to work for the first while. So I was sort of on food donations, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just with whatever little money and like a couple hundred that I had in savings, just living off of like rice. Came out rice cooker. And so yeah, I did eventually start working after like a few weeks, when I had a stable enough place that I could, comfortably work. But yeah, I didn't really go through Centrelink through the whole experience.
Like, you would think that there would be more like benefits available for people going through that situation.
Yeah.
How was balancing everything with, so you were working during that time and you were looking for work. I know that you've mentioned like the workshops and did the refuge that you stayed at provide like training and things like that for you to, I guess, boost your ability to like get a job? How did that go?
Yeah, they did. So like I mentioned, the financial literacy stuff, also just things around like living skills in general.
Yeah.
I had learnt in the refuge, how to do my laundry, how to cook basic recipes, how to clean the bathroom, like all of these things that, your parents are supposed to teach you that I didn't get a chance to learn. So all of those things, I can't remember if it was through the refuge or not, but I did access some sort of workshop or like mentoring around building up my resume and writing cover letters and all of that stuff. But I think what made it so difficult for me to find work was that I had dropped out of high school. So the highest level of education that I still have is a Year 10 certificate. And I didn't have anything further than that. And I had no work experience other than my uncle's dodgy hand job, which I didn't want to put on my resume. So because of that, I was just I was not at the top of any employer's list for just this young, homeless, just no experience, So yeah, it was impossible. It felt impossible to get my foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember that they did provide opportunities such as letting you have professional wear for interviews and things like that.
That's right. So I was linked with a organization called Dress for Success. I can't remember if they help just women or both or anyone, but they provide clothes for interviews and job interviews and just work in general for people who need it. So particularly homeless people in poverty and things like that. And so I had gone to their place. I think they're in Marrickville the last time I checked. And, they had a lot of business casual, smart, all of those kind of clothes that I didn't have. And they were super friendly. They, it wasn't just it was nice stuff.
It was comforting.
Yeah. The clothes were actually
decent stuff.
And so they even if I wanted to, they could show me how to do my makeup and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was really good. And some of the clothes that I wear now, to work and interviews and stuff, I from Dress for Success. Wow. So yeah, really good place.
So they were very encouraging, and they try to make the process as comfortable as possible for you guys.
Yeah, they did.
Wow, that's really helpful of them. Yeah.
That is a thing you don't really well, I didn't really consider is like managing your wardrobe while you're homeless is very hard.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. Like living out of a suitcase, you've got your clothes in there, you've got pretty much all of your belongings. You can't find anywhere to, I don't know, iron a shirt out. Like just something as simple as that
Yeah.
before an interview, ironing a shirt out it becomes a challenge. Or I don't know, finding cologne to wear to a job appointment or any like just things like that you wouldn't really have to think about too much. It becomes a whole process.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like so many different like details that go into the process of being homeless and getting back on your feet. How long was each stay at the different places that you guys stayed at?
So for me, the crisis refuge was like technically like supposed to be like 3 months, but I stayed for a bit longer, maybe like up to 4 to 5 months, just because I was finding it difficult to find a place because it was the caseworker's job to sort of like help me find places, but it was kind of like I was kind of left to do all of that by myself. And as I mentioned, I was very sheltered. I was also very shy, and so like picking up the phone, calling people, and oh my god, that was a lot,
daunting and overwhelming.
And especially like because the stakes are so high, it's about a place to live, and so that just beefed up the anxiety even more. So that was quite difficult. Eventually, I had found, I guess they called it like medium-term accommodation. It was more like 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
And it was like subsidized rent. But I didn't end up staying at that place. I think I slept at that place for like one night.
Okay.
And that was because like I had to share with a roommate. And I was very, like she was lovely and all that. But I was very scared and very like, living with someone that you don't know is very daunting. Like I didn't have like even a lot of skills in like co-living and like just those relational skills. Like I didn't really know how to make friends, and so that was just really daunting. So instead of staying at that place, I basically couch surfed for the rest of my homelessness. I was in a relationship with someone who was abusive. But by staying with them, I had a roof over my head and some food to eat. And so I had to, that was kind of my choice was either like staying with this, familiar, albeit toxic situation, or like be like in this unknown situation that I wasn't prepared for. So that's how that panned out for me.
Right.
Well, I was living at my brother's friend's house for, I'd say, a few weeks. And then we got transferred to crisis accommodation at a drive-in motel. And I was there for, can't exactly remember, but I think also like similar amount of time, a few weeks, close to a month. And then this is where me and my brother actually got separated in this situation because he was still going to high school and he needed to stay in that area where his high school was. And so he was allowed back to his friend's house to stay there because the friends talked with the landlord and stuff. They were happy with him staying, but they didn't want another 2 people sort of. So I was sort of left to find another spot. And then I stayed at this place called Dignity towards Fairfield, Carramar. I stayed there for for majority of the time.
Right.
But they were trying to get me into transitory housing, something like
Transitional
that.
housing.
Transitional housing, that's it. But the thing is, I was working a lot because I was trying to sort of, because I was working cash in hand, I was working cash in hand security jobs. That's why I couldn't get any Centrelink benefits because
okay.
yeah, and I decided that I'd probably be better off just working my ass off and saving, try to get enough to be able to pay off a bond.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the way I was going with. But it was very hard to do house inspections while you're doing like 5, 6, 12-hour shifts a week.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
trying to save up, working night shifts, like. So it was difficult to balance all of that. But yeah, I stayed at that, the Dignity, sort of is more like a group housing situation. I stayed there for the longest out of anywhere else.
What kind of, I guess, basic necessities did they offer? Like food, hygiene products?
Yeah. So when I was living at the motel, there was no necessity. There's nothing provided. You got a bed, and if you're lucky, if the air conditioning works, you get air conditioning.
Oh God.
But when I moved to Dignity, that all changed. You get like a little bag full of all of your toiletries, basic needs. You've got, clean sheets, clean place. Food is and whenever you need, you've got a wardrobe. You've got washing services. I actually had to pay to use washing at the motel. They
Really?
I'd have to go to the front desk and fill up a little card, and to wash my own clothes. In that sort of situation, which is a bit frustrating. But what can you do? But a lot of services were offered at Dignity. They had like communal backyard where you can just go and talk with other people. It was much more central to the location, so I could walk to Aldi or Woolworths in Villawood, I think it was.
Yeah.
Like bus stops, train stations were walking distance away, compared to this motor inn out towards Camden, which is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
They did have like counsellors on site, 7 days a week. I think 12 hours. So they were there from like early in the morning to I think 6 to 6. They were available. And so they had a printer there where if you wanted to print out a resume, or they had a communal computer you could use. But it was very sort of you're left to your own devices. You get a room, you get food, you get shelter, clothing, like a place to wash your clothes. And if you want help, you just walk up to them and ask for help. If you need to use the computer, you just use the computer. It's sort of like you're left to sort of manage things the way that you'd want it to be managed, which is like I very much appreciated that. But yeah, the services offered at that place were much better than.
That's good. That's actually really
good. Like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. No, it definitely sounds better than the previous place that you stayed at. So I guess, did you guys have any interesting experiences from the people that you've met while being homeless? Maybe at the refuge that you stayed at?
So for me, I had my own room in the crisis refuge, but I did share the house with a few other people. It was mixed gender people. It was like from ages between 16 and maybe 22. And so, we got along pretty well, thankfully.
Yeah.
And then, I wasn't really making new friends in that situation, but, I had met them and, we kind of bonded over our shared experiences. Whenever we'd go out, sometimes the caseworkers or the residential workers would take us all out to, different events, that were happening at youth centres or I know, we were close to a youth off the streets that did outreach at the park 2 times a week, and they'd have their van out and they'd have food to give to everyone. No questions asked and no cost. And so that was always I remember that being central to any anything that I went to, like if I went out anywhere,
Yeah.
like there had to be food available for me.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I was driven by food at that point. So it was
Yeah.
like, oh, I get a free feed.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like what a blessing. And so I'd go to those things a lot and like mingle with like the other kids who like were either like homeless themselves or at risk of being homeless.
Yeah.
So I guess I got acquainted with those communities, and then like it was just my just the youth workers and case workers that were involved in
Like interacting with you on a regular basis.
yeah. And it was quite a mixed experience because I had a couple of really great people who just wanted to help me out and took the effort to.
Yeah.
But then I also had some really weird and just really weird experiences with some youth workers who like didn't respect my privacy.
Right.
Like we had this rule where we had to, like, before we went into our rooms for the night, we had to make sure we did all of our chores.
Right.
And then we could, like, we had the privilege of like being in our room undisturbed for the rest of the night. But I remember there was this one youth worker I had who like would like randomly barge in like after 10 p.m. with no reason to.
Okay.
And so, you could be like in your room like, expecting privacy, and then have someone walk in and that could be super violating.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I had, like youth workers like talk about me to the other residents like behind my back.
Okay.
I remember one of them like called me a snob. I don't know why.
Oh, no.
Like I did nothing to this person, but so yeah, that was just like some super like inappropriate stuff was happening, and it was perpetuated like by the workers and not the other like young people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear stories about like other young people sort of like there's dramas there, but no, this was the workers, which was very frustrating because they're the ones that are supposed to be taking care of you,
And almost discouraging.
yeah. So met all sorts of people.
Yeah. It sounds like a mixed experience of positives and negatives. Yeah. What about you, Jamal? How are the people that you came across?
So you do end up meeting a big variety of people.
Yeah.
Like you meet people from all walks of life. I've just been chilling outside my room, and then some guy would walk past and would just start talking. I've met people that have been living in their car for the last few years, and they've just had their crisis accommodation like sort of refreshed for that year, and they've been sort of living like that long term. I've met people that have been living like that long term and working long term somehow, living out of their car, eating out of their car, showering at gyms. I've even met people that they were using the crisis accommodation because they were moving states, and they had nowhere to live at the moment. You do meet people from all walks of life. You hear a lot of different stories. You meet different people at work. I had at the place I was working, there was a guy who ran a grocery like a grocery store, and he would come outside and would just like smoke a cigarette together, like over breaks and stuff, and we'd just get sort of more and more acquainted. I told him about my whole situation. He was really supportive, one of the most supportive people throughout that whole situation. He'd bring me, he'd know that I'd be working that day. He'd bring a pastry for me because he knew that I wouldn't have eaten properly, and I refused. I said no. He'd get upset, like, no, you're taking it. Or he would call me over to his grocery store and he's like, pick out whatever you want, and I'm like, no. They're like, I'm not taking this. I can't take this. And he just says, just give me $1 and you can take it. And I'm like, oh. So you do have positive experiences, but then you also do meet difficult people.
Yeah.
And it's just, you sort of, with your experiences with other people, you just sort of take it as it comes. Like, you never know what to expect, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from someone that is usually at home sheltered. The amount of social interactions that you have as soon as you're out of home and you're homeless and you're living in a building with all these strangers and you're interacting with these new social workers, it's very exhausting.
Yeah.
It can be very, very exhausting.
Draining. Yeah.
Very draining.
Yeah.
And like you said, that privacy that you get towards the end of the day, it's like, it's gold, honestly. Like you just close your door and then just by yourself. It feels, it's very refreshing. But yeah, that's sort of my experience with other people and just interacting with other people.
Yeah, so I guess with the whole, all the stress and the trauma of the entire situation that you guys went through, what kind of like mental health services were available for you guys to access?
Yes. So when I first became homeless, I had just turned 18 and I was seeing a counsellor at the time, but they were working under child and adolescent mental health services CAMS, and so I had tipped over the age range, and so I had to access adult mental health services, and so with Mission Australia, who managed the crisis refuge, they had counsellors who I could access, and so I did have that for quite a while. It ended up being an issue because of a conflict of interest. That person I mentioned who I got into an abusive relationship with, my counsellor was also his counsellor.
I see.
And that was really awkward. And really
it's a small world.
But also it made leaving that relationship so much harder because there was this person that I was with, he was very well respected and well trusted by others, particularly those who were youth workers and familiar with the homeless communities and stuff. And so so trying to find I was without a counsellor for a while after I stopped seeing them because I had to navigate this new world of adult healthcare, which there's not really a lot of people as well don't really get the transition kind of adjustment period for that because it's just oh, you're 18, you're out the door. Now you have to
fend for yourself pretty much.
And you have to pay full price unless you have Medicare and all of that stuff.
Right. Did you feel like the counselling that you did receive, did you feel like that helped you at that stage?
I think it partly did. I did need someone to talk to. I needed a trusted adult to talk to about, what I was going through, how I was feeling, because I had no one else. By the time my first caseworker had left, they hadn't really built rapport with me, so I couldn't really trust them with my feelings and stuff. So it was good in the sense that it gave me a temporary outlet.
Yes, exactly. An outlet, exactly. What about you, Jamal? Did you guys have any mental health services available at the refuge that you stayed at?
So we did have counsellors on site, but me, I don't know for whatever reason, but I didn't use any of these services. My mental health was in a really bad state, but all I was doing was really just working and focusing on trying to get my own place. And I just neglected my own mental health for so long. It got to the point where the burnout of working and being stressed and being homeless at the same time just caught up to me, and I had a full-on mental breakdown in public. I can barely remember what happened, and that's just because I just kept pushing myself. I kept pushing my brain and my body to do things that you shouldn't do. I think this was after my second or third 12-hour night shift in a row. and I was just at a train station, and all the little bit that all it took was the train was delayed by like half an hour, and I just snapped.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
because I didn't really access those
Mm-hmm.
services.
services,
So if
yeah.
anyone is listening to this and is in that sort of situation, I urge you to
Yeah.
use the services that are available, because your mental health is just like looking after your mental health is just as important as
Mhm.
eating or sleeping. It's what you need to keep going and to keep a clear head and to sort of guide yourself through this
Mhm.
sort of situation,
Mm.
because it becomes infinitely harder when you're neglecting your needs mentally.
Yes.
But we did have those sort of services available, and there's a lot of sort of accessible mental health services available, even if you're not in a place that has counsellors on site. There's
Mhm.
always like chat rooms you can go to.
Yeah.
Like there's always
Like hotlines you can call
hotline,
as well.
100%, because I have found them to be helpful.
Yeah, like Lifeline, for example.
Lifeline has been good, yeah.
I know that you can chat with them 24 hours. They've got like
you can call them, and you
crisis assistance. Yeah.
you can just shoot them a text and they'll
Yeah.
get back to you 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've jogged my memory about the hotlines, because I have made some calls in the past,
Mm-hmm.
and were really crucial when I was in like crisis mode. Like the public like mental health breakdowns are real.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, like the thing about like being homeless, is that like it's the little things that
The little
really
things that can set you off.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
because like those like you don't have the same privileges as other people, and so things like a delayed train, like it's like
it hits like
yeah, normally like you could get someone to help pick you up.
Get an
Yeah.
Uber or something.
Yeah, but you don't have access to
Yeah.
those things, right? And so it just becomes such a big deal.
and it
it's
impacts the rest of your day.
yeah.
100%.
And then like people perceive me as like quite a well-adjusted, person.
Yeah.
But if anyone is like pushed to the point of like they become homeless and they get put
Yes.
into these situations, like it can make you go nuts, basically.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
anyone can like go down that path.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing that like I wanted to add is that like there specifically for young people, like there are like a few like services that are advertised. The most popular being Headspace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I was suggested Headspace a lot, but then was rejected by Headspace a lot
Really?
because in my experience, like my situation was too complex.
Right.
I've had that.
them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They ended up having to send me to another place because they couldn't. It was like out of their hands, sort of.
Yeah.
It was something that they couldn't handle.
Yeah.
I do understand that.
And so that can be really frustrating
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're being like bounced from service to service, and there's a lot of like administrative stuff.
Oh, and
so the waiting,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
For weeks and weeks for a phone
Yeah.
call, and then
And so when you're waiting and you don't have a home,
Yeah.
like that's like,
There's no sense of security.
No.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been so tough. So, Anna, like identifying as queer, has that impacted your experience at all?
Yeah, so my identity as a queer person, I guess, didn't really cement until later in my life after the homelessness, after leaving that relationship, where I
Yeah.
actually had time to like think
recover
about who I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the things around like me being non-binary and me not really feeling comfortable in a woman's role really exacerbated kind of the stuff that was going on at home, like a lot of the expectations that were put on me, a lot of the restrictions and all of that stuff were based on gender and were based on, you're not allowed to do this because you're a woman. You have to do this because you're a woman. And so, like, I don't know whether that pushed me into... but, yeah, so that made it really difficult. And, at the time, non-binary wasn't in my lexicon. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know what that term was back
Yeah.
then. But I just felt like something was wrong with me.
Right, right.
And so, like, it took having to, like, you know, not worry about having a roof over my head and all that stuff to, like, be able to have the time to
sort of process
yeah,
who you are.
exactly. And, you know, I was relying on men a lot, like, in terms of, like, a place to live.
Yes, yeah.
And so in terms of, like, my bisexualness, like, there wasn't really an opportunity for me to explore that
Explore
either.
it, yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like I really, like, came into myself, like,
Afterwards,
all of
yeah.
that stuff. And so because of that, I feel like I had missed out on some of the kind of formative experiences that a lot of other queer people have with, like, relationships and, like, expression and all of that stuff, because I was spending all of that time trying to survive on the
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah,
So that's sort of how in a subtle or some, like, in a different way it affected my experience.
Right, right. And so you were able to, like, I guess, find yourself afterwards when you had the time to heal and recover from, you know, the entire situation and, like, the journey that you went through.
Yeah.
So, Jamal, being a male, do you feel like your experience may have been different?
I do think that depending on what you identify as your experience in general, your just human experience does change and it does vary. But yeah, being brought up as a male I feel like it had a lot to do with my sort of attitudes and my sort of decisions towards certain things that happened. For example, not reaching out for help and just staying sort of. I'll go. You know, you get told, like, boys don't cry. You get told, like, you should just be quiet, be stoic, don't say anything, and just work hard. And that's sort of what I took way too far in this situation, where I'm just not talking to anyone. The people that I was working with, they had no clue I was homeless. And I was spending more time at work than I would pretty much sleeping.
God. Yeah.
No one but two of my friends knew, and obviously my younger brother. No one knew that about anything that was happening really. And none of my bosses knew, even when he came over to drop off a piece of uniform. I just told him to wait outside, and he just sees this big group home, and it's a very sort of strange encounter.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I do definitely think that being a man while you're homeless, certain things are easier than if you were to identify as a woman. Security is one of those things, like safety and security. I would be obviously less worried about being hurt or robbed or taken advantage of in any possible way.
That's an interesting perspective.
As a man. Because your personal security does come up quite a bit when you're homeless. You don't have a big secure house to be in, to sleep in. Your belongings aren't locked away somewhere a lot of the time. There's been times where I've put all my stuff in a shopping cart and had to just find somewhere to sit on the street because I had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And as a man, the thought didn't come through my head, like, if someone comes to me now and just decides to take all my stuff, like, would I be safe? That's not something that really goes through my head as a man. And I feel like that's where things differ a lot, is in terms of safety. Safety while you're in that sort of situation for a woman and a man, or whatever you decide to identify or whatever you identify as. And luckily the place that I was staying at in Karama and Dignity, it was very secure. They had, like, proper locks put on the doors.
Okay.
The drive-in motel, not so much. I don't even know if the door lock worked properly. But yeah, it was.
That would have caused, like, that would have been at the back of your mind, right?
I felt unsafe there.
Yeah.
And working as a security guard in the city, if like just being there made me feel very, very unsafe.
Yeah.
Very not secure. And yeah, I was just, it was just not a safe. You can tell when a place doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
You can tell when you can just feel it,
Mm-hmm.
where you're sort of not really paranoid, but you're checking your surroundings.
Yeah.
It was that sort of
A
situation.
gut feeling.
A gut feeling. And I can't begin to imagine what it would be like as a woman, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, the physical safety thing
Yeah.
is a huge thing. Like I know like a lot of women or like female presenting people like get into situations where they're having to rely on like they have to provide sexual favors for men in order to have a roof over their head and things like that. And like I did fall into that a bit. And also like something I just considered now is like when you're on your period.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, that didn't even come in my head.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even consider that.
I was very lucky in that like I had the refuge and like they provided like free pads and things like that.
Okay.
And even like when I had left the refuge, like I knew like services that I could go to where they would like just give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what I would do without that, honestly.
Yeah.
Because they're quite expensive.
That's a basic need to have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's definitely another aspect I didn't think about until now.
Yeah. The positive, though, is that, you know, like I, you know, was socialized to be quite open about my feelings with my friends and stuff. And so, in contrast, a lot of my friends did know about my situation. Unfortunately, like, you know, they were all at that point still living with their parents and like needed their parents' permission if I were to like ask to stay. And I really didn't want to burden them.
Yeah.
I understand.
But my friends like did help out like where they could. So like I've had friends like buy my groceries for me. I remember the first week where like staying in the refuge, my friend had given me this huge bag of goji berries and I had lived off of that for the first week because when we had a kitchen and everything and a pantry and all of that in the refuge. But I'm like a cat whenever I'm in a new place. Like I have to like suss out the place. I have to like stay in like my little area like for a while before I'm comfortable enough to venture out.
Yeah.
And so in my room I was just like living off of these berries. But I was very blessed to have those people in my life help me get through that.
Yeah, definitely. Having like a strong support system would change a lot of experiences.
Like that being said, the friends that have helped me out throughout that, I don't know what I would have done without them.
Yeah.
Without my friend being able to pick me up in the middle of the night, dropping me off, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know what my life would look like today. My friends, the friends that have given me rides with all my stuff, like I can't take a suitcase or like two suitcases onto a bus and a train, go across Sydney to relocate. It's like, and the friends that have helped out with like money, I've had a close friend send me like smallish amounts of money. It doesn't matter how much, but he was just supporting me in whatever way he could. And to this day, I'm eternally grateful for friends like that really help. Like it really does help to have a strong support system.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, like it provides at least a sense of security in all the chaos that you guys would have to go through. And it makes you realize the little things that you take for granted in your everyday life, 100%. How important they become when you're in a time of need. So how was the experience of transitioning out of crisis accommodation?
So for me, kind of, I was quite lucky. It was like the stars kind of aligned. I had met someone. So at this point, I was still living with my abusive ex. I had met someone who I'm now married to.
Oh, wow.
Really?
who-
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He was a good friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and he had learned about my situation.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as he learned about, like, you know, who I was with and what just
Mm-hmm.
what I was living,
Yeah.
he was like, I've got to get you out of here.
Yeah.
And like he talked to his parents about it, and his parents were fine with me
Mhm.
staying there.
Yeah.
So I essentially continued couch surfing, but this time in a place where there was no expectation for me to like be in a
Yeah.
relationship
Yes.
with this person. Eventually I did get into a relationship. I ended up really liking him. But it was a safe place.
Yes.
Very welcoming family. And then I felt ready to try and live kind of on my own, like
Mm-hmm.
in like a like sharing, like just sharing with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work out because I couldn't afford to,
Yeah.
because of the basics card.
Yes.
But shortly after that, my parents separated. And even though like my mom and I had issues, I did feel a lot safer with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so once they'd separated and like had moved out to a different place, I moved back in with my mum.
Ah, okay.
And at that point as well, because of the distance and because of, you know, the crazy experience,
Yeah.
like my mum and both my parents actually had done a lot of reflecting and a lot of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like, you know, what happened at home led to this happening. And so we have to kind of change our ways.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it was very fortunate that I was able to move back in with my mum, and kind of be able to like have that foundation and
Yeah.
start
Like
my
a
life.
fresh new start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would have definitely impacted both of your families as well. And
Yeah.
I mean, at some point they would have had to realize what went wrong and how they can like, I guess, fix it.
Yeah, like my parents aren't perfect, but like, you know, our experience, like it gives me a lot of hope for people because,
Yeah.
you know, especially like older generations, especially like, you know, coming from like ethnic families,
Yeah.
like there's a
Stigma with
assumption,
mental health.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's an assumption that they'll never change their ways, and like, you know, maybe sometimes they don't, but you know, like sometimes like experiences can change
Yeah.
people.
100%.
And in my experience, like we've all like learnt a lot about what happened.
Yeah.
And you know, they're quite different to how they were like a decade ago. And now we kind of like exist with each other, like knowing like what the stakes are of like, you know, if we don't like treat each other right, if I don't treat my child with respect, I could lose them.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge like factor for them, like, you know.
They were able to identify like healthy boundaries.
Yeah. Boundaries we still got to work on, but, you know,
Yeah.
such is life.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was I feel like there's a lot of parallels between me and you and getting back. For me, it was also sort of like the stars aligned sort of situation, where, so my dad, I do understand that his actions were wrong, and he made everyone feel incredibly unsafe. But I do also understand that he was very mentally ill. He was very traumatized.
Yeah.
And this whole sort of situation, me leaving with my younger brother, it sort of put him in a very low place. It sort of took him down back to sort of ground level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where he actually, which I'm still to this day surprised, he decided to do therapy. He decided to actually make a change to his behaviors. He went and he sort of had a hiatus back in his sort of home country for like, I think 2 months, reconnecting with family. And the interesting thing is his father, it's a chain, right? His father used to abuse him, and then he abuses me. And he sort of had a new, fresh set of eyes when he went back to his dad, and he saw his dad in a different light. He saw his dad as something he doesn't want to be.
Yeah.
He sees, you know, my grandfather was like that, and now he's very lonely. No one really wants to be with him. And my dad sees this, and he's like, I got to change the way that I act, I behave, everything. And he worked really hard, and he got to a point where we sort of rebuilt that relationship. It was relatively quick for me and him to rebuild our relationship. I understood, like, with the PTSD, like where he's coming from. It took a bit longer for him and my younger brother. My younger brother didn't just like say a word to him for like a year.
Right.
Because we did eventually end up moving back with them. We sort of ran out of options.
Yeah.
And when they went overseas, I asked my mum, it's like, hey, do you mind if I stay back at the house? And after they came back, we just sort of began coexisting. It was rough at first.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable. But we sort of all grew together as a family unit.
Yeah.
And
you were able to like reset that mindset on how to function as a family.
100%.
Yeah.
We pretty much rebuilt everything from the ground up. And without this experience, we wouldn't be anywhere near as close as we are to this day. So yeah, it was I'm very, very lucky. It's a very, like you said, stars aligned sort of situation that it ended up this way. But that's how my transition from homelessness back to stable accommodation sort of went.
Yeah. And like hearing about your dad like going to therapy and stuff, my dad actually did as well.
Yeah.
And actually like he comes to me like for advice about mental health.
Yeah,
Wow.
same with my dad.
Yeah. It's like, you know, you've been through this, I'm going through this. And yeah, like I got to give my dad a lot of credit because he's really like had such a huge internal shift.
Yeah.
And is very different to the person he was
Yeah.
back then. And it shocks people when I tell them, which I'm sure it's the same thing. You're like, what do you mean, like your brown Gen X dad goes to therapy and like believes mental health is like a real thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like very proud of him for you know opening his eyes.
Yeah.
When it comes from an ethnic parent, you know that change has been made.
100%.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't begin to believe what my dad used to be like. Like when they see him now, he's like, oh, he's this nice like older man. He's funny, cracks jokes. But back in the day, he was like, even when he was sort of my age, he was known to be a very aggressive, angry person. And the person he is now is basically a teddy bear. Like he's made a lot of changes, and I do want to really say that I appreciate the effort that he's put in and who he's become now, and how much effort he's put into mending, like truly mending his relationships with people. So people can definitely change.
Yeah. And that must be really encouraging to see your parents in a new light, and how they've also managed the repercussions of everything that happened. Well, I guess reflecting back on the entire journey, what would you guys change about the experience, if there were anything?
I think, you know, there was no way for me to know. Like I was just figuring out stuff on the fly, which is, you know, such a common experience. In terms of what I wish would change, I wish that, you know, on a systemic level, that there was more support available for you know, young people going through homelessness. You know, I've seen what it looks like when things are put into place, like when you have like great caseworkers, when you have like refuges available that have like all of the resources that you need. I was like, I'm one of the lucky ones in that I you know, even though like it wasn't the best experience, I still had access to things. And I wish those things were available to more people.
Yeah.
I wish in my case that there was like, you know, after my caseworker had left, that there was another caseworker that actually like read up on my situation and followed up with things and things like that. And I also wish that the youth workers around me spent more time protecting me and building my autonomy instead of siding with my ex-partner. I feel like if that there was some intervention, then that would have prevented like a lot of damage on myself. So yeah, things like that.
Yeah, like kind of like a stronger like a support system in the structure of how I guess the caseworkers would manage things.
Yeah, and like that's why like a lot of like the work that I do now is around like advocacy around young people's issues, particularly young people who experience marginalization and disadvantage, because there's a lot needs to be changed and improved.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes there's just a lot that people experiencing homelessness aren't aware of, like the things, the services, the opportunities that are available for them. So it's really important that caseworkers and advocates and anyone that can get their voice out allows that opportunity for people experiencing that situation to become aware of it. What about you, Jamal?
So I completely 100% agree on that there should be some sort of systematic change. Like from my personal experience, if I would change anything, honestly speaking, I'm as difficult as it was, I'm pretty grateful for everything that I've been through, because that was a very sort of forming part, like a formative time in my life where I learnt a lot of lessons. It really helped build who I am today.
Yeah.
And the life lessons that I took from there, you wouldn't learn anywhere else. Like I'm sure you'd know.
It would have been like fundamentally transforming.
Oh, it was like 10 years of life experience compressed into a few months.
Yeah. Like I don't know if you experienced this, but I feel like that period of time, like I aged so much.
I swear, I wouldn't have been surprised if I woke up I had grey hair. Like, it was stressful. But I definitely felt like I aged quick during that. But with the systematic change, the help is there. It's just that a lot of people slip through the cracks. Like a lot of people, like for example, like with you, your caseworker left, and then you got handed over to someone who isn't as passionate about your case or is more neglecting. Those sort of things I feel like happen all the time in these sort of scenarios. And there does need to be a lot more awareness about what services are available, what you can do. And there needs to be more of like a clear set plan on
like the
how
steps.
to support yourself and what support is available for you in the steps. Because this is just talking from my experience. A lot of the time it did feel like I was just left to fend for myself. And that the only services I really received is shelter and food, which I'm eternally grateful for, but it'd be good if there was a more systematic, organised way of supporting me during that period in time. So again, the services are there. They just need to be made more aware. And to anyone in that sort of situation, I highly recommend that they do their research, look things up, look at what sort of services are out there because it can make a
big difference.
Huge difference. And that's what I think. That's the only thing that I really change is there needs to be more organisation and more
exposure
to these services.
Exactly. Wow. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and experiences and like I guess all the trauma and recovery and everything that you guys went through. It was definitely something very courageous and brave that you guys did, because a lot of people, they don't even take that step and they remain in the same position
Yeah.
for God knows how long. So yeah, you guys really took a step to make change happen, and that's definitely something to be proud of and very inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was a very cathartic experience.
Yes.
Like reflecting on like what happened, but also like how much we've grown.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%.
And not even just you guys, the people around you as well, which is even better.
If there's anyone that is in this sort of situation, or they see themselves at risk of being in this sort of situation, if I had one piece of advice to give you, is keep a cool and level head and take care of yourself and just focus on surviving day to day. Focus on looking after yourself, and the whole experience will pass. You will find yourself in a few months' time, 6 months' time. It doesn't really matter how long, but you will find yourself in a better, more stable position if you look after yourself. And that's all you really need to focus on now. Do your research, get the help that you're entitled to, and yeah,
when
look
you've
after yourself.
when you've hit rock bottom, the only way is up.
Is up.
So thank you for listening to our podcast. I hope it gave you some perspective on the topic of homelessness. And if you need any help, you can call Lifeline or Sydney Queer Muslims. You can reach us on help@sydneyqueermuslims.org.au.